My name is Marco. For 8 years, I have been a sentinel of shadows, a silent guardian of secrets that would unravel the very fabric of belief for billions. I am one of the few, the chosen, who stands watch over the Vatican's Relic Vault at night. Not the public archives, mind you, nor the well-trodden catacombs you might read about in tourist guides. This is a different Vatican, a hidden ancient core buried deep beneath centuries of stone and faith, where the air itself feels heavy with untold ages and unspeakable power. They call it the Umbral Sanctum, though no one ever speaks its name aloud in the light of day. Here, the relics are not just historical artifacts, they are anchors to realities far older and far more terrifying than anything humanity has ever dared to imagine. And 6 rules, carved into my memory like a sacred, terrible litany, are the only things that keep me alive between dusk and dawn. Every night, as the last rays of the Roman sun paint the dome of St. Peter's Basilica in hues of fiery orange and deep violet, a different kind of twilight descends upon me. It is a twilight of the soul, a descent into depths where the conventional understanding of existence warps and fractures. My uniform, once the colorful livery of the Swiss Guard, has been replaced by simple, practical robes of midnight blue, designed for silence and anonymity in the perpetual gloom. My halberd, a symbol of earthly defense, now feels almost comically inadequate against the unseen forces I am sworn to contain. The weight of my duty is not measured in pounds or ounces, but in the crushing burden of knowing what lies beneath, and the absolute necessity of keeping that knowledge from the sleeping world above. The silence down here is not the absence of sound, but a vast, living entity capable of amplifying the slightest creak, the faintest rustle of my own robe into a deafening roar within my skull. It is a silence that breathes, that waits, that seems to watch with ancient, unblinking eyes. The very air, thick with the aroma of damp earth and something else, something indefinably ancient and metallic, presses down, a physical manifestation of the untold centuries that have passed in this subterranean realm. Each breath I take feels like an intake of history, a communion with epics long forgotten by the surface world. I remember my induction as if it were yesterday, though it feels like a lifetime ago now. I had been a Swiss Guard, young and full of zealous faith, when I was approached by Father Julian. He was an old man, his face a road map of ancient sorrows, his eyes holding a depth that suggested he had witnessed more than any mortal should. His skin was parchment thin, stretched taut over sharp cheekbones, and his lips, habitually pursed, seemed to hold back a deluge of unspoken horrors. Yet there was a profound calm about him, an almost preternatural stillness that hinted at a spirit forged in the fires of unimaginable trials. He spoke of a higher calling, a sacred duty beyond the ceremonial. He spoke of safeguarding not just the Pope, but the very essence of stability in the world, the fragile veil that separated mankind from a cosmos utterly indifferent, and in many ways hostile. I was flattered, eager to serve, my youthful idealism still unblemished by the grim realities that lay ahead. I imagined glorious sacrifice, heroic stands against tangible threats. I was woefully unprepared for the true nature of the war I was about to join. My understanding of faith and duty was about to be reshaped into something infinitely darker, more complex, and terrifyingly real. He led me through endless subterranean passages, down spiral staircases that seemed to bore into the very core of the earth, past frescoes that faded into indistinguishable blurs, deeper and deeper, until the sounds of the city, indeed the sounds of any living world, were utterly extinguished. The descent was methodical, a slow, deliberate shedding of the familiar. Each turn in the twisting corridors felt like a severance from the world above. The air grew thick, cold, and strangely metallic, carrying the scent of damp earth, decaying stone, and an elusive tang I couldn't place, like ozone after a lightning strike, but ancient, calcified, laced with a faint, sweet decay that hinted at organic matter not quite dead, not quite alive. The walls, once ornate with faded Christian iconography, became rough-hewn stone, damp with an ancient sweat, slick to the touch, and imbued with an oppressive stillness that pressed in on all sides. We passed through vast, echoing cisterns, their unseen waters murmuring in the deep, and crypts filled with the silent repose of forgotten saints, their dust-shrouded effigies gazing into an eternal darkness. The sense of isolation grew with every step, a primal fear beginning to prickle at the back of my neck, a nascent dread that whispered of things best left undisturbed. My uniform, once a source of pride, now felt like a shroud, its bright colors a mockery of the creeping gloom. The very stone beneath my feet seemed to absorb all light, all hope, leaving behind only the cold, unyielding reality of the abyss. He opened a door, not with a key, but with a series of intricate, almost ritualistic gestures and a silent incantation, a language I did not understand but felt resonate in my bones, a deep hum that seemed to vibrate through the very bedrock beneath our feet. The door itself was not made of wood or iron, but a seamless slab of black basalt, devoid of hinges or handles, appearing to simply melt inward at Father Julian's command, revealing not an empty space, but a solid mass that receded into the wall with a sound like grinding teeth. Beyond it lay not a single vault, but a labyrinth of chambers, each one humming with a faint, almost imperceptible vibration, like 1,000 sleeping instruments playing a silent, discordant symphony. The scent was a strange mix of ozone, dust, and something else. Something sickly sweet and utterly alien, like forgotten incense mixed with the metallic tang of old blood, a scent that clung to the air and seeped into the very fabric of my clothes, becoming a permanent part of my existence down here. It was here, in the oppressive silence of that place, bathed in the pale, sickly yellow glow of ancient flickering gas lights that cast long dancing shadows, that Father Julian began my true training. He did not teach me how to wield a halberd or how to execute a tactical retreat. He taught me how to survive a spiritual war waged in the shadows, a war against things that had no form, no logic, and no mercy. He taught me the true meaning of vigilance and the terrifying cost of even a single lapse in discipline. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of millennia of accumulated dread, each word a warning, a prophecy of the horrors that lurked in the very fabric of reality just beyond the veil. He sat me down on a cold, stone bench, its surface worn smooth by the passage of untold centuries, and his voice, though soft, seemed to fill the vast emptiness of the vault with an authority that brooked no argument. Every word he uttered was delivered with a measured gravity, each syllable a chisel carving into the stone of my young mind. "Marco," he began, his eyes piercing through me, seeing not just the man before him, but perhaps the raw potential for destruction that lay dormant in this subterranean world. "You are now a custodian of the Umbral Sanctum. Your duties are simple, yet their failure carries a price beyond human comprehension. You will guard these relics. You will ensure their containment. And you will follow these 6 rules without deviation, without question. For they are the only tether you have to life, to sanity, to your very soul. They are the only bulwark between order and an oblivion so profound it would make the void seem like a comfortable bed." He paused, letting the full weight of his pronouncement settle upon me, then gestured around the echoing chamber, the dim light barely illuminating the shrouded forms within. "Disregard them at your peril, for the consequences are not merely physical, but existential. They affect not just your flesh, but the very essence of your being and ripple outwards to touch the fragile balance of the world above. This place, Marco, is a wound in reality. Your task is to keep it from festering. Rule number 1. Never look directly at certain objects, especially those not illuminated by the blessed light. He pointed to a collection of pedestals shrouded in heavy velvet cloths, placed in deeper alcoves where the gaslight struggled to reach. These cloths were not ordinary velvet, I later learned, but interwoven with strands of consecrated silver and infused with ancient hermetic seals designed to absorb and diffuse certain forms of psychic radiation. He explained that some relics were not merely objects, they were windows, or perhaps mirrors, to realms that were anathema to human perception, realities composed of non-Euclidean geometries and impossible colors, where causality was a suggestion and form was a fleeting concept. To look upon them directly, he warned, was to invite a fragment of that alien reality into your mind, to witness distortions of form and color that would render your sanity into a shattered mosaic, a kaleidoscope of horror from which no recovery was possible. Your eyes, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, an almost imperceptible tremor running through his aged frame, are not merely organs of sight. They are conduits, and some conduits were never meant to carry such currents. To see what lies beyond these veils is to have your very soul etched with patterns that were never meant to exist within the human psyche. He spoke of a former custodian, Brother Thomas, who, during a shift, had reportedly been mesmerized by a strange bodega or lay emanating from one of the shrouded relics, a light that seemed to call to him to promise revelations. He had pulled back the cloth, his curiosity overcoming his training, a single fatal act of disobedience. They found him the next morning, his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, unblinking, fixed in an expression of frozen terror. But his pupils were not human. They were swirling, kaleidoscopic patterns of impossible geometry, shifting and reforming with silent internal energy, and his mouth was frozen in a silent scream, his tongue a twisted, blackened thing, withered as if by an unseen fire. He lived for another week in the infirmary, before finally expiring. But in that week, he never spoke a word, only made a low, guttural humming sound, a continuous, droning vibration that seemed to emanate from deep within his chest, his eyes fixed on the ceiling as if seeing visions no one else could perceive, visions that had utterly consumed him, rewriting his very being into a non-human configuration. His mind, Father Julian assured me, had simply unraveled, shattered by what he had seen, by the impossible realities burned into his optic nerves and thence into the very core of his being. From that day, a heavy, interwoven veil of dark, thick cloth was placed over all such relics, impenetrable to even the most intrusive light and sight. And a specific designation, lumina obscura, was cited Sign Bashir was assigned to them in the custodian's log, a warning, a designation of absolute peril. I understood then that my duty was not just to prevent theft, but to protect myself from the very things I guarded, from the inherent, existential threat they posed. The thought of Brother Thomas, his eyes replaced by swirling patterns of insanity, haunted my first few weeks in the sanctum, a chilling reminder of the fragility of the human mind when confronted with the truly alien. I learned to navigate the chambers by memory, by the subtle echoes of my own footsteps, by the unique, subtle chill emanating from certain corners, anything to avoid a direct gaze at the shrouded horrors. It became an instinct, a second nature, to avert my eyes, to focus my peripheral vision on the floor or the wall beside a lumina obscura object, never allowing my conscious thought to even acknowledge what might lie beneath its oppressive shroud. I would sometimes feel a subtle pull, a faint, almost magnetic allure from behind the heavy velvet, a phantom suggestion of light and impossible beauty. But the image of Brother Thomas's twisted, silent face was always enough to snap me back to the grim reality of the rule. I learned to walk with a peculiar, almost unnatural gait, my head slightly lowered, my gaze sweeping the familiar patterns of the floor tiles or the rough-hewn stone walls, avoiding the specific points where I knew the forbidden relics rested. It was a dance of avoidance, a choreography of fear, performed nightly in the dim, shifting shadows. Even the flickering gaslight seemed to conspire against me, its unsteady illumination capable of casting fleeting, deceptive shapes that could momentarily trick the eye into seeing something that wasn't there, or worse, hinting at something that was. My heart would pound against my ribs during these patrols, a frantic drumbeat against the overwhelming silence, a constant reminder of the thin line between duty and disaster. Rule number 2. Never acknowledge sounds that are not distinctly human, and never, under any circumstance, respond to a call when you are alone. The vault, Father Julian explained, was a place of immense spiritual pressure. The relics in their sealed containers constantly emitted a subtle psychic resonance, a chorus of whispers from the past, from other dimensions, from entities long imprisoned or merely lingering, trapped between worlds. "You will hear things, Marco," he prophesied, his gaze unwavering, his voice a low, steady rumble that seemed to reverberate in the cold stone. Whispers that promise power, lost loved ones, ultimate truth, forbidden knowledge, boundless comfort. Scuttling sounds in the periphery of your hearing, like rats, but too large, too deliberate, too rhythmic, too close for comfort. Faint cries like a child lost in the labyrinth, weeping inconsolably, or a woman sobbing, her grief a palpable thing. The sounds of chains dragging on stone, of ancient machinery grinding, of laughter that is not laughter, but a tearing sound. These are not echoes. These are not your imagination. These are attempts to draw you in, to break your focus, to make you acknowledge their presence, to give them a sliver of your attention, your belief, your fear, your sympathy. To acknowledge them is to invite them closer, to give them leave to manifest further, to give them a purchase on your reality. To respond to a direct call, one that speaks your name in the empty darkness, one that seems to come from an impossible distance yet right beside your ear, is to open a door that can never be closed, a door through which they may step, or through which a part of you might be drawn. He recounted an incident with custodian Elena, a woman of formidable will and unwavering faith, known for her stoicism and mental fortitude. One night, deep in the Vault of Whispers, a section known for its particularly persistent auditory phenomena, where the very air seemed to vibrate with 1,000 unheard voices, she heard her own deceased mother's voice, calling her name, pleading for help. Her tone imbued with such heart-wrenching agony that it pierced through Elena's carefully constructed defenses. Elena, in a moment of overwhelming grief and distraction, a momentary lapse in her iron discipline, uttered a single, hesitant, "Mother?" That was all it took. Her superior, Father Julian, found her hours later, huddled in a corner of the vault, rocking back and forth, chanting the litany of St. Michael at an almost feverish pace. Her eyes were glazed, but the most horrifying thing was the thin, almost invisible web of what appeared to be silvery threads, spun from pure light, extending from her mouth and ears, stretching into the shadows as if tethered to something unseen, drawing sustenance from her very essence. She was physically unharmed, but her mind was broken. The web, Father Julian explained, was a psychic conduit, a drain. For the remaining 2 years of her life, Elena never spoke another coherent word, her only utterance a constant, soft, almost inaudible whispering, as if she were perpetually engaged in a conversation with someone or something, only she could hear. Her strength, her vitality, seemed to slowly ebb away, leaving her a hollowed-out shell. She withered, not from illness, but from an invisible consumption, as if her very essence was being siphoned away, one whisper at a time, until nothing was left but a fragile, desiccated husk. The last time I saw her, a few months before her death, her eyes, though still human, held a distant, haunted look, as if seeing vast, unimaginable landscapes of sorrow, and a faint, ethereal shimmer occasionally flickered around her lips, like moonlight on spider silk, a sign of the invisible drain at work. Father Julian insisted that she had given a part of herself away, an irreparable tear in her spiritual fabric, by acknowledging the call. I have learned over my 8 years to filter these sounds, to treat them as background noise, no matter how compelling, how heartbreaking, or how terrifying they become. The crying child, the lover's plea, the mocking laughter, the dragging chains. They are all just static, white noise from other realities, designed to lure me into a trap. My mind is a fortress, and its drawbridge remains eternally raised. I walk past the chambers where the air pulses with unseen whispers, my breathing shallow, my ears straining to hear only the internal rhythm of my own heart, the only truly human sound in this silent abyss. Sometimes, when the silence is particularly heavy or the whispers more insistent, I find myself humming a forgotten hymn, a simple, familiar melody to fill the void, to drown out the insidious invitations. It is a small act of defiance, a way of asserting my humanity against the encroaching alienness, a way of anchoring myself to the world I left behind. The temptation is always there, a faint echo of a loved one's voice, a tantalizing offer of forbidden knowledge, a promise of escape from this suffocating duty. But the image of Elena, her vitality slowly drained, her mind consumed by unseen entities, is a potent antidote to any straying thought. I sometimes wonder if the whispers grow louder or more desperate when the sanctum perceives my attention wavering, testing the resilience of my resolve. It is a constant battle, not against a physical foe, but against an insidious, psychological assault designed to erode the very foundations of myself. Rule number 3. Never touch any relic without explicit ritualistic permission, and never with bare skin. This rule, Father Julian explained, was rooted in both spiritual caution and practical containment. He described the relics not merely as objects, but as condensed nodes of anomalous energy, living conduits or dormant consciousnesses. To touch them, especially with unprotected flesh, was to invite a direct, uncontrolled transfer of that energy, a psychic backlash that could range from instantaneous incineration of the nervous system to a gradual, insidious corruption of the soul. "These are not stones, Marco," he had said, holding up a pair of heavy, lead-lined gauntlets, their surfaces gleaming dully in the gaslight, etched with intricate sigils and faint script in a language I recognized as ancient Latin, though with glyphs unfamiliar to any scripture I had ever seen. These are points of immense power. Some of them are benevolent, yes, but even a saint's sacred relic, if handled improperly, can unleash a torrent of spiritual force that would annihilate a mortal. Others are less so. They are fragments of forgotten gods, remnants of impossible technologies, or crystallized nightmares from the dawn of time. Their very substance is anathema to human biology and consciousness. He went on to explain that the gauntlets, along with a specific series of prayers and anointing oils, formed a protective barrier, a sort of spiritual insulation. Even with these precautions, direct physical contact was kept to a minimum, reserved only for critical containment adjustments or transfers between sections of the vault, and always under strict supervision. He spoke of Custodian Gabriel, a man known for his meticulous adherence to regulations, but whose vigilance had faltered in a moment of crisis. A containment seal on a particularly volatile relic, a shard of obsidian said to be chipped from a throne in a dimension of pure despair, had begun to glow with an unsettling inner light, and its containment field flickered, Gabriel, rushing to stabilize it, had instinctively reached out with a bare hand to steady the trembling obsidian, his mind focused solely on preventing a catastrophic breach. The moment his skin touched the surface, a soundless scream filled the chamber, heard only in the minds of those present. His hand, from fingertips to forearm, solidified instantly, transforming into the very same black obsidian, cold and utterly devoid of life, but still attached to his arm. The transformation didn't stop there. Over the next 2 days, the obsidian began to spread, slowly, agonizingly, consuming his flesh, turning him into a living statue of the dreadful stone, his eyes wide and pleading, even as they darkened and lost all trace of humanity. He became a new, horrifying relic, sealed away in a bespoke containment chamber, a silent monument to the price of a single, impulsive touch. His form now stood in one of the deepest, most secure chambers, a constant, chilling reminder. I have seen it. Or rather, I have walked past the thick, reinforced glass of its prison, feeling the profound, aching cold that emanates from the obsidian figure, a cold that seems to seep into the very marrow of my bones. My first interaction with a relic, even with the gauntlets and under Father Julian's watchful eye, was an experience I will never forget. It was a simple, ancient scroll bound with threads of human hair, said to contain the first incantations uttered by humanity to bind minor demons. Even through the thick lead and consecrated leather of the gauntlets, I felt a subtle current, a faint vibration that seemed to hum in sympathy with my own pulse, but out of phase like a discordant echo. It was a sensation of immense age, of countless voices whispering within its very fibers, a faint but pervasive aura of ancient malice and desperate power. The air around it felt strangely heavy, charged, as if static electricity danced just beneath my skin. My hands, encased in the protective gear, still trembled slightly, not just from the physical weight, but from the profound spiritual heft of the object. Father Julian watched me with an unreadable expression, his silence a test in itself. I followed his precise instructions, moving the scroll from its pedestal to a new containment box, performing each action with meticulous care, my movements slow and deliberate, each breath a conscious effort. The ritualistic permission involved a series of short, whispered prayers to the Archangel Michael, prayers for strength and protection against contamination, followed by anointing the gauntlets with a specially blessed oil that shimmered with an almost ethereal light. These preparations took 10 minutes, during which time my heart hammered like a trapped bird. The fear was not just of physical harm, but of a deeper, more insidious corruption. The thought of Gabriel, frozen in obsidian, was a constant shadow in my mind. Even now, after 8 years, whenever I must handle a relic, the same cold dread settles in my stomach. The gauntlets feel less like protection and more like a fragile shield against an ocean of unimaginable forces, and the rituals less like a formality and more like a desperate plea for continued existence. I move with a quiet reverence, treating each object not as an inert artifact, but as a slumbering beast, capable of awakening with terrifying consequences if disturbed incorrectly. My senses are heightened during these moments. Every creak of the stone, every subtle whiff in the air, a potential harbinger of danger. The sheer variety of containment methods, from lead-lined boxes to stasis fields humming with unseen energy to thick, consecrated glass, speaks volumes of the diverse and terrifying nature of their contents. Rule number 4. Never deviate from your predetermined patrol route, and never investigate a path that appears new or altered. Father Julian's voice had taken on an even more chilling timbre when he spoke of the sanctum's volatile geography. "This place, Marco," he had explained, gesturing vaguely at the shifting shadows of the vast chamber, is not merely constructed stone. It is a living, breathing labyrinth, constantly reshaped by the currents of reality that surge through the relics. The residual energies of these artifacts, some of which defy known laws of physics and spatial dimension, can subtly, or not so subtly, twist the very fabric of space within these walls. Corridors can lengthen, shorten, or simply cease to be. New passages might appear where none existed before, beckoning with an illusory promise of discovery or escape. Old ones might vanish, replaced by solid rock or an unnerving expanse of nothingness. Your patrol route, meticulously mapped and blessed, is a sacred path. It is a thread through the maze, woven with prayers and wards, designed to guide you through the stable sections of this shifting reality. To stray from it, to follow a path that appears new, is to step off the thread into a tapestry of chaos. He paused, his gaze fixed on a distant shadowed corner where the gaslight seemed to flicker with an unnatural irregularity. These anomalies are not accidental, they are deliberate lures. The entities contained or attracted here, sensing the presence of a conscious mind, will attempt to manifest these shifts, to create distortions, to draw you into realms from which there is no return. They seek to trap you, not just physically, but existentially, in pockets of non-linear time or impossible space, where your very existence can be unwound. He then recounted the tragic tale of custodian Sister Agnes, a devout woman known for her unwavering dedication to the sanctum's spiritual preservation. One night, during a routine patrol in a lesser-used eastern wing, she reported a sudden, unexplained cold spot and a faint, shimmering distortion in the air where a solid wall had always stood. Curious, and perhaps believing it a test of her faith, she approached. As she drew closer, the distortion resolved into a narrow, perfectly formed archway, leading into a short, brightly lit corridor that seemed utterly out of place, radiating a warmth and light that stood in stark contrast to the sanctum's oppressive gloom. She hesitated for a moment, recalling the rule, but the allure of the warmth, the stark absence of dread, overcame her. She stepped through. Her last coherent transmission, recorded on the sanctum's ancient surveillance system, was a startled gasp, followed by a sound like brittle glass shattering, and then silence. They never found her body. However, for years afterward, on the anniversary of her disappearance, a faint, almost transparent apparition of Sister Agnes would appear in that very spot, standing just at the threshold of the illusory archway. She would be aged beyond recognition, her robes tattered, her face etched with unimaginable sorrow, and a profound, hollow emptiness in her eyes. She would stretch out a hand, silent, seemingly pleading, her lips moving in a perpetual, soundless scream, before flickering and fading back into nothingness. Father Julian believed she was trapped in a temporal eddy, a pocket of accelerated time, her consciousness perpetually replaying the moment of her fatal curiosity, her form a ghost between realities, a chilling testament to the dangers of deviating from the path. My own experiences with Rule Number 4 have been less dramatic, but no less terrifying in their implication. The sanctum's inherent instability often manifests in subtle ways. A corridor I've walked hundreds of times might for a fleeting second seem infinitesimally longer, or the angle of a turning subtly altered. The stone walls, usually rough and ancient, might momentarily appear smooth, almost polished, before reverting to their familiar texture. My internal compass, honed over years, often battles with these minor distortions. There are times when I pass a section of wall and feel a faint hum, an almost imperceptible vibration, and for a split second I glimpse a faint impression, as if a doorway could open there, a faint outline of a passage that isn't there, but might be. It's a trick of the light, I tell myself, a product of my sleep-deprived mind, a misfiring synapse. But the dread is real. The rule is absolute. I have learned to trust my internal maps more than my momentary perceptions. I trace my patrol route with a nearly obsessive focus, counting my steps, noting familiar cracks in the stone, memorizing the specific sequence of gaslights in each corridor. I repeat the names of the chambers as I pass them. Vault of Whispers, Crypt of Silent Saints, Chamber of Veiled Truths, anchoring myself to the known. The idea that a familiar wall could simply melt away, revealing an entirely new, alien path, is a constant, low-level anxiety that underpins my every step. The temptation, though subtle, is always present. What if that new path leads to an escape? What if it leads to a revelation that could end this torment? But the fate of Sister Agnes, perpetually reaching out from a personal hell, serves as a stark reminder. This place doesn't offer escape, only different forms of imprisonment. There was one shift, 6 years ago, where I distinctly saw a new, impossibly narrow crack appear in the basalt door of the Umbral Sanctum itself, radiating a faint, pale, green light. And for a moment, I thought I heard children laughing from within. It was terrifyingly alluring. My hand instinctively reached out before I snapped it back, forcing myself to turn away, to recite the litany of St. Michael at a frantic pace, my heart racing. When I dared to look back, the crack was gone, the basalt as seamless and impenetrable as ever. It was a test, I realized, a deliberate attempt to draw me in. I passed it, but the memory of that green light and the phantom laughter still chills me to the bone. It taught me that even the most fundamental structures of this place are not immune to its insidious influence. Rule number 5. Never gaze into your own reflection for longer than a fleeting glance, and never engage with depictions of living things that seem to move or change. The Umbral Sanctum, Father Julian had imparted, his voice low and deliberate, is a place where the lines between animate and inanimate, between observer and observed, become dangerously blurred. The concentration of anomalous energies here has a peculiar effect on light and shadow, and especially on surfaces that reflect. A reflection, Marco, is more than just an image. It is a momentary resonance, a fragile bridge between self and perception. In this place, that bridge can become a portal or a means for something else to step through, or worse, to step into your reflection and claim your identity. Similarly, the ancient frescoes, the carved effigies, the tapestries depicting saints and heroes are not merely art. They are imbued with residual psychic imprints, echoes of devotion, or even in some cases, the lingering consciousness of the entities they depict. If these images appear to move, to smile, to weep, or to follow you with their eyes, they are attempting to engage. To engage with them is to give them permission to manifest, to draw sustenance from your living essence, or to begin the insidious process of replacement. He spoke of custodian Leo, a meticulous and pious man who had always kept a small, polished silver crucifix in his pocket, a personal comfort against the pervading darkness. During a particularly long and lonely patrol, Leo had taken out his crucifix, as was his habit, to reflect on its sacred image, and in its polished surface, he saw his own face, distorted, eyes wide, with a silent horror he didn't feel. Before he could look away, the reflection seemed to smile, a wide, malevolent grin, and then his reflected image raised a hand, beckoning. Leo, gripped by an unholy fascination, gazed, longer, struggling to reconcile the horrific image with his own steady self. His reflection began to move independently, its lips forming silent words, its expression shifting from malevolence to a terrifying mimicry of his own distress. The real Leo, paralyzed by a nameless dread, couldn't avert his eyes. They found him hours later, slumped against a containment unit. His physical body was untouched, but his mind was utterly blank, his eyes mirroring the hollow, vacant stare of his silver reflection. He was institutionalized, remaining in a vegetative state for years, occasionally, fleetingly, whispering fractured words, all of which referred to a second self that had stolen his face. Father Julian believed that Leo's reflection had indeed become an entity, a psychic duplicate that had drawn out and consumed Leo's sense of self, leaving him an empty vessel. The entity, perhaps, still roamed the sanctum, looking through Leo's reflected eyes. This rule, quickly, became one of the most psychologically taxing for me. The sanctum, despite its ancient stone, is filled with reflective surfaces, polished containment units, the smooth, dark basalt of certain walls. Even the faint sheen of dampness on the rough stone can catch the gaslight just so, forming fleeting, distorted images. I learned to avoid them, to glance quickly away, to never let my eyes linger on my own form. It's a strange feeling to be so deeply aware of your own existence, yet to actively deny seeing your own image. My personal method is to count to 3 in my head whenever I must pass a reflective surface, ensuring my gaze shifts away before the count is complete. The thought of my reflection smiling back, independently, with malevolent intent, is a persistent, chilling whisper at the back of my mind. What if one night it doesn't look like me? What if it looks back with the eyes of Brother Thomas, or the empty gaze of Custodian Elena, or the obsidian stare of Gabriel? The fear is that I would not even know if I had been replaced, that the me walking the patrols might be just an echo, while the true Marco is trapped in some unholy mirror realm. Beyond reflections, the sanctum is also adorned with ancient art, frescoes of saints performing miracles, intricate carvings of biblical scenes, mosaics depicting celestial beings. Most are faded, their colors muted by time and the dim light, but some still retain a startling vibrancy. I pass a particularly old fresco in the Chamber of Martyrdom, depicting Saint Sebastian riddled with arrows. For weeks, it was just a painting, albeit a haunting one. Then, one night, as I passed, I swore I saw a single dark tear trace a path down Saint Sebastian's painted cheek. My heart leaped into my throat. I immediately averted my gaze, muttering a quick prayer, forcing myself to keep walking. When I dared to glance back minutes later, the tear was gone, the fresco as static as always. It could have been the flickering light, a trick of shadow, a smudge on the ancient pigment, but the memory of Leo's vacant eyes, the story of his lost self, kept me from investigating. Another time, I was patrolling the crypt of silent saints, where effigies of forgotten holy figures lay entombed. One effigy, carved from alabaster, depicted a sleeping nun, her hands clasped in prayer. As I passed, a shiver ran down my spine. Her lips, or so it seemed, had curved into a faint beatific smile, a subtle shift in expression that had not been there before. I quickened my pace, my skin crawling, not daring to look back. The rule is not just about avoiding harm, but about maintaining the very integrity of my perception, my reality. To acknowledge such a change, to engage with it, would be to invite the alien into my sanctuary, to grant it a foothold in my mind. The sanctum seeks to consume, to transform, and the subtle shifts in art, the malevolent reflections, are its gentle, insidious invitations to surrender. I often find myself consciously blinking rapidly when passing these areas, as if to reset my vision, to dispel any lingering illusion, to confirm that what I am seeing is indeed inert stone and paint, not a living watchful entity. Rule number 6. Never believe what you see from the past, or attempt to alter a perceived historical event. Father Julian reserved this rule for my final lesson, delivering it with an air of profound weariness, as if even speaking of it drained him. "The relics in these vaults, Marco," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "are not merely objects of power, but also nexus points of history. Many have witnessed epochs, been present at pivotal moments, or were even instruments of great change. Their accumulated psychic and temporal resonance creates echoes, impressions of the past that can sometimes manifest here. In this unique environment, you might perceive flashes of historical events, visions of ancient Rome, glimpses of religious rites, or even, God forbid, fragments of your own past, memories you thought long buried. These are not true temporal anomalies in the sense that they are not real events occurring in the present. They are projections, illusions, echoes. They are not to be trusted, and under no circumstances are you to attempt to interact with them or believe you can change them. He explained that these temporal mirages were often incredibly compelling, designed to exploit a custodian's sense of duty, their empathy, or their personal regrets. To step into such a vision to try and alter what has already been would be to shatter your connection to the present reality, to become lost in a loop of historical illusion, or to attract entities that feed on temporal paradoxes. He cited the case of custodian Brother Peter, a scholar of ancient history and a man deeply empathetic to human suffering. During his patrol near a relic known as the Weeping Shroud of Antioch, an artifact said to have absorbed the despair of countless persecuted Christians, Brother Peter began to perceive a full sensory vision. He saw a marketplace in ancient Antioch filled with terrified civilians, Roman soldiers on a rampage, and a young woman, strikingly similar to his own deceased sister, being dragged away to her doom. The vision was so vivid, so heartbreakingly real, that Brother Peter, overcome by a desperate need to intervene, to save this woman, extended his hand, uttering a cry of warning. The moment he did so, the vision solidified around him, consuming him entirely. He was not physically gone, but his body stood motionless, eyes wide, fixed on the empty air, his arms still outstretched. They found him that way. For the next 10 years, Brother Peter remained in that catatonic state, his eyes tracking unseen movements, his lips occasionally moving, whispering fragments of ancient Latin, always ending with the same despairing plea. I couldn't save her. I couldn't change it. Father Julian believed that Brother Peter was trapped within the temporal echo, forced to perpetually relive the tragedy he had tried to alter, his consciousness bound to a past that was not truly his spirit a permanent prisoner of a phantom history. This rule is, for me, perhaps the most insidious, as it preys on the most human of emotions, regret, and the desire to make things right. The Umbral Sanctum, with its vast collection of artifacts, is a canvas for history, and the sheer antiquity of the place seems to thin the veil between past and present. I have experienced these temporal echoes myself, though never as vividly as Brother Peter. Sometimes, in the deepest chambers, where the air is particularly thick with the dust of ages, I catch faint scents, not the usual damp stone and ozone, but the sharp tang of ancient spices, the faint aroma of incense long burnt, or even the coppery smell of old blood, mingling with the sickly, sweet alienness. I've heard snippets of dialogue in languages long dead, disembodied voices murmuring prayers or desperate pleas, carried on currents of air that don't exist. Once, near a section containing relics from the Roman Empire, I saw a fleeting flicker of light, like sunlight glinting off a legionary's helmet, and for a split second I heard the faint, distant roar of a crowd, a cacophony of triumph and despair. My instinct, drilled into me by Father Julian, was to ignore it, to focus on the rhythmic sound of my own footsteps, to recite the current date, the purpose of my patrol, anything to anchor myself to the now. The constant nagging thought is, what if I see something from my past? A moment of failure, a loved one I've lost, a decision I regret. The temptation to reach out, to speak, to try and change what cannot be changed would be overwhelming. The sanctum, in its cruel wisdom, knows precisely how to tempt the living. It doesn't offer worldly riches or power, but rather the siren song of altered history, the false promise of redemption. I often reflect on the phrase, "the past is immutable," a truth that seems to ache with greater weight down here. To challenge it, even within a fleeting illusion, is to invite existential catastrophe. I envision myself, a husk, endlessly reliving some forgotten moment, forever bound to a phantom existence, while my true self is consumed by the hungry void. It reinforces the cold, hard discipline required for this duty, absolute detachment, not just from the relics, but from the very human impulses that define us. My humanity, I sometimes think, is slowly being chipped away, replaced by the unfeeling vigilance of a machine. It is a sacrifice I make for the sleeping world above. 8 years. 8 years of this perpetual twilight, this war against unseen, unheard, untouchable horrors. My youthful idealism, once a bright flame, has been tempered by the pervasive gloom into a smoldering ember, fueled by grim necessity rather than fervent hope. My world has shrunk to these subterranean passages, these flickering gaslights, these 6 immutable rules. The sun, the sky, the vibrant chaos of Rome. They are distant memories, almost like a dream I once had. I sometimes find myself forgetting the rhythm of life above, the casual banter, the laughter, the mundane concerns of a world blissfully unaware of the ancient horrors simmering beneath its feet. My sense of time has become warped, each night blending into the next, punctuated only by the subtle shifts in the sanctum's oppressive atmosphere, the changes in the phantom whispers, or the unsettling stillness that occasionally settles like a blanket woven from dread. My shifts are long. 12 hours of silent patrol, broken only by a brief ritualistic meal and a few hours of uneasy sleep in a small Spartan cell deep within the sanctum's upper, less anomalous levels. Even there the cold seeps into my bones and the silence echoes with the remembered whispers from below. Dreams are a rare luxury and often fractured, filled with non-Euclidean geometries, impossible colors, and the silent screams of forgotten custodians. I wake often with a gasp, my heart pounding, convinced I've seen something I shouldn't, or heard a call that spoke my name. It takes me precious moments to ground myself, to remember the rules, to assure myself that I'm still whole, still Marco. Father Julian visits infrequently, usually once every few weeks, to deliver supplies, check the integrity of certain containment units, and offer a quiet, almost ritualistic blessing. He never stays long, his ancient eyes always scanning the shadows, his face a mask of profound, weary knowledge. We rarely speak, for there is little to say. He understands the burden I carry, and I understand the burden he has carried for decades, perhaps centuries, for he seems timeless, a living relic himself. His presence, however brief, is a grim comfort, a reminder that I am not entirely alone in this desolate task. He is the last link to the hierarchy above, the one who knows, who remembers, who safeguards the safeguards. I wonder sometimes what price he has paid, what part of his soul he has surrendered to the Umbral Sanctum. His skin is like ancient parchment, his movements slow, deliberate, almost devoid of spontaneous human gesture. He rarely smiles, and when he does, it is a fleeting, sorrowful expression, as if he carries the weight of all the world's hidden terrors. His calm is not peace, but a profound resignation, a spirit forged in constant vigilance. The Umbral Sanctum itself is a place of paradoxical grandeur and horrifying simplicity. Some chambers are vast, carved from solid rock, their ceilings arching into unseen darkness, supported by colossal pillars that seem to stretch into infinity. Others are claustrophobic, narrow passages lined with containment units, their surfaces humming with contained power or shimmering with subtle, unsettling distortions. The air is always cold, a bone-deep chill that no amount of clothing seems to fully ward off, and laden with the peculiar scent, that mix of ozone, ancient dust, metallic tang, and the sickly sweet alienness that has become the signature of the place. The gas lights, strategically placed, cast long, dancing shadows that seem to possess a life of their own, twisting familiar forms into grotesque caricatures, making the innocuous terrifying. I've learned to read these shadows, to understand their deceptive nature, to recognize when they are simply shadows and when they are something more, something that moves with an unseen intent. My patrol route is a precise, measured journey through these chambers. I walk the same path every night, a silent, solitary figure, my soft robes whispering against the stone. I pass the Vault of Whispers, where the air hums with unheard voices, and I press my lips together, humming my hymn, shutting out the insidious invitations. I pass the lumina obscura alcoves, averting my gaze, feeling the subtle psychic pull from behind the heavy velvet, the phantom suggestion of impossible light. I carefully navigate around the polished containment units, ensuring my eyes do not linger on their reflective surfaces, quickly verifying that my reflection is indeed my own, and not some grinning impostor. In the chamber of Kronos, where the air shimmers with faint temporal distortions, I recite the date aloud in a low whisper, anchoring myself to the present, ignoring the phantom smells of ancient marketplaces or the fleeting glimpse of an impossible sky. Each step is a conscious act of defiance against the insidious forces that seek to unravel me. I have come to understand that my role is not one of combat, but of containment. I am a living lock, a conscious barrier. My vigilance is the final seal on these ancient horrors. The true battle is waged not with weapons, but with mental fortitude, with an unwavering adherence to the 6 rules, with the suppression of every human instinct that would lead to curiosity, compassion, or fear. The price of failure is not just my life, but perhaps the unmaking of reality itself. Sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, when the silence is so profound it feels like a physical presence, I allow myself a moment of reflection. What did I give up? A life in the sun, a future, perhaps a family, normalcy. But then I remember the face of Brother Thomas, the whispers consuming Elena, Gabriel frozen in obsidian, Peter lost in a phantom past. I remember the weight of the secrets I guard, the sheer, unimaginable horror contained within these walls. And I know that the sacrifice, though immense, is necessary. The world above sleeps in blissful ignorance, and that ignorance is my greatest gift to it, purchased at the cost of my own peace, my own sanity, my very soul. My faith, once simple and direct, has morphed into something darker, more pragmatic. It is no longer just faith in God, but faith in the efficacy of the rules, faith in the continued integrity of these ancient wards, faith in my own ability to endure the slow, grinding assault on my being. It is a lonely faith, forged in the depths of the abyss. The very stone of the sanctum feels colder tonight, or perhaps it is just me. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor runs through the floor, a deep, resonant hum that seems to emanate from the very bedrock. It is not an earthquake. I know these subtle shifts. It is the sanctum, breathing, stirring, perhaps reacting to a faint tremor from the world above, or perhaps merely stretching its ancient, unseen muscles. The gaslights flicker erratically, casting wild, dancing shadows that twist and stretch, briefly animating the inert forms of the relics in my peripheral vision. The air grows heavy, thick with that sickly sweet alien scent, more pronounced than usual. I hear the faintest whisper, not the usual chorus, but a single distinct voice, soft and melodious, like a lullaby, seeming to emanate from the Vault of Whispers, calling a name that is almost, but not quite, my own. My heart gives a sudden painful lurch. I tighten my grip on the phantom halberd that still feels present in my mind, even though I carry no weapon but my will. I quicken my pace, my eyes fixed on the path before me, my lips moving, silently repeating the words of the litany of St. Michael, drowning out the seductive call. The rules are my anchors. They are my bulwark. They are all that I am and all that I have left. The night is long and the sanctum is always hungry. I walk past the Chamber of Unseen Hands, a vast cavern where rows of containment units, each glowing with a faint internal light, are suspended in midair by unseen forces. This chamber always feels colder, the air thinner, as if something within is actively draining heat and essence from the very atmosphere. I remember Father Julian's grim warning about this particular section. Here, Marco, the relics are not just objects, but fragments of beings that exist beyond our dimension. Their touch, even their proximity, can rearrange the molecular structure of the unwary or transpose their consciousness into non-existence. I never linger in this chamber, moving with a brisk, determined stride, my peripheral vision hyper-aware of the shifting lights, making sure none of them seem to intensify or change color. The faint humming from the suspended units creates a dissonant chorus, a silent symphony of alien intent that grates on the nerves. It's a place that makes the skin crawl, a profound sense of being utterly insignificant in the face of titanic, cosmic entities. My path leads me next to the Grotto of the Sibyls, a smaller, more intimate chamber, but no less terrifying. Here, several ancient sarcophagi, intricately carved with figures that seem to writhe in agony and ecstasy simultaneously, are sealed with heavy iron bands and thick, leaden plates. These contain the remains of individuals who, according to Father Julian, had achieved a form of unholy enlightenment. Prophets who had gazed too long into the abyss, seers whose minds had become conduits for malevolent truths, or mystics who had embraced forbidden knowledge. "Their slumber," he had cautioned, "is a mercy. Their awakening would be a catastrophe." The air in the grotto is particularly heavy, redolent with that sweet, decaying alien scent, mingled with something sharp and metallic, like old blood. I pass quickly, my eyes averted from the contorted faces on the sarcophagi, for even in stone their anguish seems palpable, their torment infectious. I once thought I heard a faint scratching sound from within one of them, a soft, rhythmic scraping against the stone, like fingernails seeking release. I froze for a moment, my breath caught in my throat, before forcefully reminding myself of rule number 2. It was an echo, a trick of the mind, the insidious influence of the sanctum. I continued my patrol, my pulse racing, chanting a silent prayer for the tormented souls that lay entombed beneath the heavy stone. The routine is a shield, a ritualistic dance against chaos. Every step, every glance, every averted gaze, every internal whisper of a hymn or a date is a part of that ritual. My mind has become a meticulously organized fortress, compartmentalizing fears, cataloging in anomalies, and rigidly adhering to the strictures that define my continued existence. The Marco that exists on the surface, the young, zealous Swiss guard, is long gone. He withered and died somewhere in the endless descent, replaced by this watchful, wary sentinel, a creature of the shadows, intimately familiar with the anatomy of dread. There are moments, however, when the facade cracks, a fleeting memory of sunlight on a piazza, the distant sound of church bells from the world above, carried by some impossibly thin vent, a reminder of the life I once knew. These are the most dangerous moments, for they breed a longing, a yearning for the mundane that can shatter my resolve. The sanctum, it seems, is acutely aware of these vulnerabilities. The whispers grow more poignant, the illusions more enticing, the calls more familiar whenever my thoughts stray. It is a symbiotic relationship, a constant test. The sanctum seeks to consume, and I exist to resist its ravenous hunger, to hold the line no matter the personal cost. My duty is my identity, my cage, and my salvation. I sometimes wonder what will become of me. Will I, like Elena, wither into a whispering husk? Will I, like Gabriel, solidify into a grotesque new relic? Will I, like Peter, become lost in an endless phantom past? Or will I simply endure, a silent guardian, until my body gives out, my mind finally fractured by the unending pressure? Father Julian, with his ancient eyes and parchment skin, is the only template I have for longevity in this role. But even he bears the scars of countless nights spent in this abyss. The thought of a successor, of another young, idealistic soul being led down these winding stairs, fills me with a strange mix of pity and grim acceptance. The line must hold. The rules must be passed on. The world must remain ignorant. And so, I continue my patrol, one lonely, vigilant step at a time, a sentinel against the encroaching darkness, my only companions the flickering gaslights and the silent, breathing dread of the Umbral Sanctum. The weight of 8 years of vigilance presses down on me, a physical ache in my chest, a constant dull throb behind my eyes. I am Marco, and I am the wall. The night stretches before me, an endless expanse of shadows and potential horrors, and I am ready. I must be. For the world depends on it. The very fabric of reality, I am convinced, rests on the unwavering resolve of a solitary man in a midnight blue robe deep beneath the ancient stones of Rome, guarding secrets that were never meant for human eyes or minds. My existence is a prayer, a warning, and a promise that for one more night the abyss will remain contained and humanity will continue its slumber, undisturbed by the terrors that lie just beneath the surface of their waking world. The air in the Chamber of Lost Reveries often feels particularly charged, a subtle shimmer visible if one looks just right, like heat rising from an ancient desert floor. Here, relics pertaining to prophetic dreams, forgotten faiths, and collective unconscious anxieties are housed in ornate, yet strangely simple, wooden boxes. Father Julian had explained that these boxes were crafted from the wood of an ancient, sacred cypress, harvested from a grove said to be a nexus of dreams and premonitions, then sealed with prayers against mental intrusion. This chamber is unique in that the danger is not a direct physical or visual one, but an assault on the mind's inner landscape. I often feel a profound sense of melancholy here, a creeping sorrow that isn't my own, like a collective sigh from millennia of shattered hopes and unfulfilled prophecies. Sometimes I catch glimpses of phantom scenes in my peripheral vision, not full temporal echoes, but fleeting impressions. A sun-drenched field filled with impossible flowers, a starless sky above a crumbling megalith, a vast ocean of churning thought. These are the lost reveries, the collective dreams and nightmares seeping from their wooden prisons, seeking a mind to inhabit, a consciousness to corrupt with their potent, alien beauty and despair. I learned to build mental walls in this chamber, to focus on the cold reality of the stone, the scent of damp earth, the precise rhythm of my breathing, anything to push back the encroaching tide of alien consciousness. It is exhausting, this constant mental battle, a war fought entirely within the confines of my own skull. Beyond the Grotto of the Sibyls lies the Hall of Whispering Echoes, a long, narrow passage where the sounds are particularly insistent. It's here that the static from other realities seems to reach its peak, the air vibrating with an almost unbearable cacophony of unheard voices. I've heard phantom melodies of instruments that never existed, the distant thrum of alien machinery, the soft, desperate pleas of countless souls, and sometimes, worst of all, perfectly ordinary sounds. A child's laughter, a dog barking, the gentle rush of a river. These mundane sounds are the most insidious, for they tear at the fabric of my detachment, reminding me of the simple beauty of the world I've forsaken. I often find myself humming louder here, my chosen hymn a desperate shield against the rising tide of external input, my footsteps quick and decisive, urging me onward, away from the overwhelming sensory assault. The sheer scale of the Umbral Sanctum is difficult to convey. It is not merely a single level of vaults, but a nested complex, a series of descending tiers. each guarded by older, more intricate wards, each housing artifacts of progressively greater power and danger. I patrol the upper, more stable tiers, the ones that are merely immensely dangerous. The lowest levels, I've heard Father Julian whisper, are places of pure, unadulterated oblivion, where reality itself struggles to maintain coherence. I have never been to these lowest levels, and I pray I never will. The very thought of them sends a shiver, a profound dread down my spine, a cold worse than any the sanctum can conjure. I imagine impossible geometries, landscapes of pure thought, and entities that make the contained horrors of my patrol route seem like child's play. The gaslights here are fewer, the shadows deeper, and the silence seems to hum with a greater, more profound weight. My training with Father Julian, beyond the rules, also involved intricate rituals of purification and mental conditioning. Each day before my shift, I perform a series of prayers and meditations, chanting ancient litanies of protection, anointing myself with blessed oils, and donning my robes with a specific ritualistic solemnity. These are not merely acts of faith, but practical measures designed to reinforce my spiritual defenses, to make my mind a less permeable barrier against the psychic intrusions of the sanctum. He taught me breathing exercises, ancient techniques for clearing the mind, for achieving a state of absolute, unshakable focus, a mental stillness that is almost inhuman. It is a constant battle against the encroachment of the alien, a daily reaffirmation of my own humanity, however fractured it may become. The psychological toll is undeniable. Sleep, when it comes, is rarely restful. My dreams, if they are not nightmares of impossible shapes and colors, are often strangely empty, vast voids of nothingness that leave me feeling more drained than refreshed. My sense of taste and smell has become dulled to anything outside the sanctum's peculiar palette of ozone, decay, and ancient metallic tang. Food, when I eat it, is a necessary fuel devoid of pleasure. The world above, the normal world, feels increasingly alien to me, its concerns petty, its joys shallow. I am a ghost walking among the living, a phantom tethered to the abyss. One night, several years ago, during a particularly intense storm above, I felt the sanctum tremble more violently than usual. The deep hum increased in intensity, vibrating through the stone floor, up through my boots, and into my very bones. The gas lights flickered wildly, threatening to extinguish altogether, plunging me into absolute, terrifying darkness. The whispers in the vault of whispers escalated into a frantic clamor, a chorus of shrieks and pleas and guttural snarls that seemed to press in on all sides, threatening to overwhelm my mental defenses. For a moment, a single, horrifying moment, I thought the containment had failed, that the veil had torn. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against the encroaching chaos. I felt a surge of primal fear, a desperate animal urge to flee, to abandon my post and run. But then Father Julian's voice echoed in my mind, calm and unwavering. "Discipline, Marco. Focus. The rules are your bulwark." I forced myself to breathe, to focus on the cold stone beneath my feet, to repeat my hymn, louder now, a defiant roar against the rising tide of alien sounds. I walked my patrol, every step an act of pure will, my eyes fixed forward, refusing to acknowledge the impossible shadows dancing at the edge of my vision, refusing to respond to the myriad voices that screamed my name, or offered escape, or promised oblivion. The storm passed. The sanctum settled. The whispers receded. I completed my shift, physically trembling, mentally exhausted, but unbroken. It was a test, I realized, the greatest one yet, and I had passed. But the memory of that night, the sheer, overwhelming proximity of uncontained horror, is etched into my soul, a constant reminder of the fragility of the line I hold. The relics themselves are a source of endless, silent fascination. I've seen containment, units designed to hold what Father Julian described as a shard of primordial darkness, a piece of the cosmos before creation, which seemed to absorb all light, leaving a perfect, unmoving void in its center. I've passed relics that emanated a profound, aching sorrow, their presence enough to bring tears to my eyes, even through my rigorous mental defenses. There are artifacts that shimmer with a faint internal light, like captured stars, their glow pulsating with an unknown rhythm. Others are utterly mundane in appearance, a simple wooden box, a rusty iron key, a weathered stone tablet, yet their containment is just as elaborate, their power no less terrifying. It is a gallery of impossible wonders, a museum of cosmic dread, and I am its sole, unwilling audience. My life above ground is a phantom limb, an ache for something that is no longer there. I don't miss the specific pleasures of the city, the Roman sunlight, the laughter, the crowds. I miss the choice to experience them. I miss the easy ignorance of believing the world was simply what it appeared to be. Now, my eyes are open, and what they have seen, what they are sworn to guard, has irrevocably altered my perception of everything. The world above, with its petty squabbles and fleeting joys, seems fragile, a thin membrane stretched precariously over an abyss. And I am here, beneath the membrane, a silent, unseen guardian, ensuring it does not tear. The burden of this knowledge, this constant vigilance, is a profound and isolating weight. There are no heroes' welcomes down here, no medals, no recognition, only the quiet, unending terror and the grim satisfaction of another night passed, another catastrophe averted. My faith has changed, deepening in some ways, hardening in others. It is no longer a naive belief in divine benevolence, but a desperate, pragmatic conviction that there are forces of order, however grim, that must contend with the forces of chaos, however absolute. And I am one of those forces of order, a small, solitary bulwark against the encroaching void. As the hours tick by, measured only by the slow consumption of the gas in the flickering lamps, I continue my round, past the vault of whispers, past the lumina obscura, past the reflective surfaces and the animated frescoes, past the temporal echoes. Each rule is a mantra, a silent prayer, a line drawn in the shifting sands of reality. The Umbral Sanctum is quiet tonight, perhaps, or perhaps it merely waits, testing my resolve, watching for the slightest lapse. And I, Marco, the sentinel of shadows, will not provide it. Not tonight, not ever. My hand instinctively touches the rough, cool stone of the wall as I pass, a tangible anchor in this world of illusion and dread. The journey is long, the darkness profound, but I walk it, one disciplined step after another, a guardian of secrets, a silent, unwavering shield against the unknown, preserving the fragile peace of a sleeping world, until the first faint stirrings of dawn, many hours from now, promise a brief, temporary respite from the cosmic horrors of the Umbral Sanctum. My 8 years have woven themselves into the very fabric of this place. I am as much a part of its silence and its secrets as the relics themselves. The line between man and sentinel has blurred, perhaps irrevocably, but the purpose remains crystal clear: to contain, to guard, to endure. My watch continues in the heart of the hidden Vatican, where faith and fear intertwine, and the true meaning of vigilance is etched not on stone, but on the very soul of Marco, the custodian of shadows. My breath is shallow, my heartbeat a steady, rhythmic drum against the pervasive silence. The air's heavy, the shadows long, and the secrets I guard hum with an ancient, terrifying life, waiting, always waiting for a single lapse, a single error, a single forgotten rule. But I will not yield. Not now. Not ever. For the sake of all that is and all that might be, I hold the line. The profound stillness of the sanctum is often deceptive. Sometimes, when the gaslights dip low or a particular atmospheric shift occurs, I feel a strange pressure like water pressing against my eardrums or a silent scream trapped just beneath the surface of my perception. It's a tension that builds, a sense of an unseen presence expanding, contracting, breathing in time with some alien rhythm. It feels less like an empty space and more like a vast, conscious entity, ancient and indifferent, slowly unfurling itself in the deepest depths of the earth. I've learned to recognize these shifts, these subtle changes in the sanctum's mood. When this happens, I tighten my mental discipline, reinforcing my internal walls, doubling down on my adherence to the rules. It's during these periods that the whispers become more urgent, the phantom visual distortions more vivid, the temptations more potent. It's as if the sanctum itself is testing the integrity of its own containment, probing for weaknesses in its human guardians, and I am its current test subject. The thought of what would happen if the sanctum were truly breached, if these rules were collectively disregarded, is a terror I rarely allow myself to contemplate. Father Julian once, in a rare moment of explicit frankness, alluded to consequences that would make the Black Death seem like a minor inconvenience. He spoke of reality unraveling, of the very laws of physics dissolving, of concepts like time and space becoming meaningless suggestions. He spoke of the surface world being consumed not by fire or flood, but by an existential horror, a profound alien corruption that would render existence itself into a screaming, non-Euclidean nightmare. The image he painted, though abstract, was more terrifying than any specific monster. It was the undoing of everything, the erasure of all meaning. That vision, that chilling possibility is the ultimate fuel for my tireless vigilance, the ultimate justification for my lonely sacrifice. It reinforces the cold, hard truth. My duty is not for myself, not for the Vatican, but for all of humanity, for the very concept of existence as we know it. My footsteps echo faintly in the vastness, a monotonous rhythm that has become the soundtrack of my life. The midnight blue robes, once new, are now worn soft, faded in places, imbued with the unique scent of the sanctum. My boots, heavy and sensible, are polished by countless miles walked on ancient stone. My hands, though I keep them bare for flexibility during general patrol, only donning the gauntlets for direct relic interaction, are rough, calloused, and often cold to the touch. They are the hands of a working man, a soldier, in a war that has no front lines, no glory, only unending watch. My face, I imagine, has changed too, etched with lines of perpetual worry, my eyes holding a depth of knowledge that would shock the world above. I have seen too much, heard too much, ignored too much, to ever be truly normal again. Sometimes a strange sense of empathy washes over me, empathy for the relics themselves, not for their malevolence or their destructive potential, but for their eternal imprisonment. They are fragments of other realities, trapped, perhaps as unwillingly as I am, in this subterranean prison, forced to endure the unending passage of time. They hum with power, they whisper with longing, they radiate despair, and I, the guardian, am also a prisoner, bound to them by an unbreakable covenant of duty and dread. We are all here together in the darkness, waiting for what I do not know. Perhaps for the end of time, perhaps for a freedom that will never come, perhaps simply for the next flicker of the gaslight, another cycle of silence and vigil. The very concept of the blessed light that Father Julian mentioned when speaking of rule number 1 is a constant presence in my mind. The gaslights are not truly blessed, of course, not in the ecclesiastical sense, but they are a human invention, a tangible manifestation of our world, and their pale, sickly glow is a defiant spark against the cosmic dark. They represent order, the familiar, the rational, however tenuous, and the complete absence of light, the true darkness of the deepest sanctum, is where the most profound terrors reside, where the impossible colors bloom unseen, where the non-Euclidean geometries twist space into knots that defy comprehension. To lose the gaslights, to be plunged into that absolute darkness, would be to surrender to the Umbral Sanctum entirely, to become one with its unspeakable depths. It's a fear I carry always, a phantom chill on my skin. As my shift progresses, the sense of isolation becomes almost absolute. The world above ceases to exist, fading into a distant, abstract concept. There is only the sanctum and me, my breathing, the beat of my heart, the soft rustle of my robes. These are the only sounds I truly acknowledge, the only undeniable proofs of my continued existence in this realm of the impossible. I am a living clock, counting the moments, measuring the eternity of the night. Each step is a word, each patrol a sentence, in a silent, unending narrative of containment and dread. The final hours of the night are always the hardest. The gas in the lamps begins to dwindle, making the light even fainter, the shadows even longer and more menacing. My body aches, my mind is weary, and the constant mental effort required to maintain vigilance weighs heavily. It is during these hours that the sanctum seems to make its final, most desperate attempts to breach my defenses. The whispers grow more coherent, the visual distortions more tempting, the phantom sense more vivid. But I resist. I always resist. For 8 years I have held the line, and for another night I will continue to hold it, until the faint, almost imperceptible shift in the ambient pressure signals the approach of dawn, the slow retreat of the sanctum's deepest horrors, and the blessed temporary return to a slightly less terrifying reality. The silence that then descends is not the living, watching silence of the night, but a weary, exhausted quiet. It is the silence of a battle concluded, a vigil fulfilled. And in that silence, I find a brief, fleeting moment of peace before the cycle begins anew. My watch, an endless testament to human fragility and resilience, continues. The world sleeps, and I, Marco, remain awake, a sentinel of shadows, a guardian of the deep. My story is written in the darkness, in the unwavering adherence to 6 terrible rules, and in the profound, unspoken horrors that lie contained, for now, within the Umbral Sanctum. It is now a little past 5 in the morning, Roman time. The earliest hints of dawn are beginning to touch the surface world, filtering through the layers of earth and stone, though no light reaches me directly. I can feel it, though, a subtle change in the air pressure, a faint, almost imperceptible hum that replaces the deep, resonant tremor of the night. The sanctum, like a sleeping behemoth, is withdrawing its most active influences, settling back into its ancient slumber. The gaslights, though dim, seem to hold a more steady flame now. They're flickering, less frantic, the shadows less eager to dance. The whispers in the vault of whispers have receded, becoming just a faint, almost ignorable static once more. The heavy, sweet alien scent is still present, a permanent part of the atmosphere, but its intensity is lessened, allowing the more familiar smell of damp earth and old stone to reclaim dominance. My body is exhausted, my mind a blank slate of weary relief, yet a profound sense of accomplishment settles over me. Another night contained, another morning secured. My final task for the shift is to perform a perimeter check of the main antechamber, the entry point into the deepest parts of the sanctum, ensuring all seals remain intact and no residual anomalies linger near the basalt door. I walk with a slow, deliberate pace, my every movement imbued with a sense of ritualistic closure. I run my hand along the cold, unyielding surface of the basalt, feeling for any vibrations, any subtle irregularities. It is smooth, silent, and impassive, just as it should be. I check the arcane glyphs etched into the surrounding stone, confirming their faint, inner glow is stable and unwavering. They pulse with a low, steady energy, the magical wards holding fast. As I complete my check, I hear the distinct sound of footsteps approaching from the tunnel that leads to the upper levels. These are human footsteps, deliberate and heavy, distinct from the phantom scuttling or dragging chains of the night. It is the relieving custodian, Brother Antonio, a man of quiet demeanor and equally grim resolve, who has shared this subterranean vigil with me for the past 2 years. His presence, though rarely accompanied by conversation, is a welcome sign of the continuity of our sacred, terrible duty. He is younger than I, perhaps in his late 20s, but his eyes already hold a flicker of the weariness that marks all who serve in the sanctum. He emerges from the tunnel, his own midnight blue robes mirroring mine, a heavy lead-lined lantern swinging gently in his hand, casting a brighter, more focused beam than the old gaslights. He gives me a brief, solemn nod, his face devoid of emotion, a reflection of the shared burden. "Marco," he murmurs, his voice low, almost a whisper, as if unwilling to disturb the fragile peace of the dawning sanctum. "Antonio," I reply, my voice hoarse from disuse. "All is contained. No significant deviations." I don't need to elaborate. We understand the unsaid language of the sanctum. No unspeakable horrors materialized, no custodians lost, no reality threads frayed. He nods again, his gaze sweeping the antechamber, his eyes quickly assessing the status of the wards and containment. He doesn't question, doesn't pry. He simply accepts. He knows. He has his own stories, his own whispers, his own struggles with the 6 rules. He takes his place, a silent guardian stepping into the vigil, ready to face the encroaching shadows of the day as the sanctum prepares for its more subtle, diurnal manifestations. My duty for the night is done. I offer a silent, swift prayer of thanks, not to any specific deity, but to the continued resilience of reality itself, to the efficacy of the ancient wards, and to the unwavering discipline that has kept me whole for another 12 hours. I turn, my movements slow and stiff, and begin the long ascent back through the labyrinthine passages towards my Spartan cell in the upper reaches. The air grows marginally warmer with each upward step. The sounds of the sanctum's deeper hum recede, replaced by the faint, distant echo of the city above, stirring to life, the first hint of ordinary, blessed daylight, filtering through a narrow, grated vent in my cell, will be my only reward. But it is enough. It is always enough. For the sleeping world above, my vigil continues, a silent guardian in the darkness, a keeper of the impossible. I am Marco. I am the wall, and the wall, for now, stands firm. Another night has passed, another victory, however small, against the encroaching oblivion, and with the dawn, another cycle of unseen battles begins, entrusted to the quiet, determined hands of Brother Antonio. My weariness is profound, but so too is my resolve. The rule